Alright, I considered just making this like a proper video, but I I didn't have it in me. I've put a lot of effort into this topic before, but was never happy with it, so I'm just gonna go through the video and talk about it. Because though I'm not like a big clock solver, I do have a lot to say about the idea that people want events removed in the first place. I think it's really ridiculous. So here it is. This is a video by Matthew Mayernik. I hope that's how you pronounce it. He put a poll out on his channel the other day. Yeah, here, obviously, quite clearly that people don't want clock removed. Obviously, I said nothing should be removed. Removing an event will never have any benefit to competitors. All it does is remove the opportunity to compete in it, which, you know, objectively true. And I said we should be adding events that's much more exciting, and he seemed to lean like completely in on that. By this logic, we'd add every event, which it isn't really true. Because, well, my point was that the events we already have, we're just removing isn't going to benefit us anymore. Leaning full in on adding, we should be adding events. I didn't really say anything about that, but oh well. You know, I feel like most people were saying that. There's a lot of if clock weren't an event, I wouldn't add it. But you know, I don't necessarily think it's true that it wouldn't be considered to be added. Like, clock is a puzzle that is made by Rubik's. I think that if clock wasn't already an event, it would actually be quite. It would be well known enough to be considered at least. So I don't know, but that's all a matter of opinion. We could never tell that, so it shouldn't really be used as a point. And I shut the video because I'm an idiot. Right. Anyway.
Over the years, clock has gotten lots of criticism from the community, from it being the only.
I did ask Jacob. Matthew did not ask to use this footage. Now I don't really understand fair use. I know this isn't commenting on the video at all. But on a moral level, you should probably ask people before you use their video as a backdrop to your point about removing their main event, because I think they're going to say no. So, you know, not a great move on Matthew's part to just use these clips without asking, but, you know, and these stay on for most of the video. This is like most of the WR average.
People have called for the removal of clock. Recently, in the past couple of years, when companies like Shingshao and Qi started to manufacture clocks, it started a revival in the clock subcommunity of Q.
Well, the new hardware it wasn't just something that revived the community, but it also made it. It also removed one of the points people were always making about clock, which was that the hardware was really bad and there was a huge barrier to entry. There's literally less of a point now for removing clock than there was ever. So,
should the clock still be removed? This is the case against clock, and why there is still a strong argument for its removal as an official event in the World Q Association. I recently put out a community poll to see the community's thoughts on this. A majority of people said that they would like to keep clock, but when they gave their reasoning, they stated that they didn't like it.
That's fine. I don't really like Scube. But
wouldn't add it if it wasn't already an event, but don't think it's necessary to remove it. Of the people,
I mean, I think, okay, there's my comment again. Yeah, I think that's a very fair point to say. It's that you don't like the event, but you know, you can respect the fact that other people do and don't want to remove it. I think that's exactly where you should stand if you don't like the event. I'll get into my actual thoughts after this, but I'll keep going through this.
People who are passionate about clock, they gave other reasons. People said that removing an event has no benefit to the community, and that it screws over the people who have spent time learning clock.
Yeah, So obviously what he's just commented on is that I said we shouldn't remove any events, and also about the fact that it's not very nice to practice it.
For the first part of this argument, it's easy to see that removing an event has great benefits.
I want you to think about that because he claims that these are great benefits. I really don't think the things people are claiming are great benefits to removing an event is actually a great benefit.
If you were to eat pizza, each slice you eat has less and less benefit to your overall satisfaction. At a certain point, having the 18th slice of pizza does more harm than good. It causes you to get sick and throw up. If you keep adding events and never removing them.
You see this? So he's comparing that to the case of adding more events rather than, like, the WSA has run fine for years. Clock has been there from the beginning, and major championships can still run to schedule. With Clock as an event, you don't have to remove events to schedule your championships better. We did a very good job at the UK Championship. It was run with events going simultaneously, and we actually got plenty of rounds of everything.
It doesn't just only add benefit. At a certain point, it has a cost to the community. Wouldn't we just add...
And I don't disagree that if we did add loads of events, that there would be too many eventually, but 17 events is not too many. We don't need to get rid of any.
Every puzzle in existence to the WCA, if there was only benefit, at a certain point, there will be too many events in the WCA. Just like there's too much pizza to eat.
So yeah, that's my main issue with what he said against mine, was that there'll eventually be too many events. But if that's what he's saying, and for that to be a point against Clock, you would have to assume that 16 events is the perfect amount of events for the WCA, and Clock is tipping the balance somehow, which I really do not think is true, because Clock is a very short event. It's probably the short event that takes the longest, because there can be some issues with it, and scrambling can take a while, but, like, A, that's a solvable problem, and B, it's still a shorter event than holding big cubes or big blind and things, but not that I want any of them removed either, because that's not what I'm like.
The second part of this argument is more compelling. The last thing you want to do is take away a lot of people's hard work. But, as we can see, with the removal of feet, other organizations, such as extraevents.org, have kept the feet community alive.
2020, 2020, 2020, 2020. I mean, speed cubing extra events has not been active. Because the owner of speed cubing extra events is Russian, and is quite annoyed at there being no comps at the moment. We aren't using speed cubing extra events, but even when it wasn't, like, not happening, I haven't seen any of that. I've seen one speed cubing extra events round in my life, and it was team blind, not feet. I actually really enjoyed competing in feet, and I had strong opinions on that as well, but that's not what this is about. The removal of feet has been pretty unfair, in my opinion, and claiming that we have speed cubing extra events to make it feel better, that's not really the same thing. So, I mean, basically, all these people who put effort into getting Clock world records, Clock, continental records, their national records, all they can say now is, if you remove it, is, I have the speed cubing extra events world record, I have the speed cubing extra. It just sounds made up. It's not the right thing. People deserve recognition, because Clock is very hard at the top level. It is maybe easy to get decent at, but it's very hard to get to the top level at. And there's a lot more that goes into it than you think.
As well as other communities. This allows for people to still get official times while keeping the event out of major championships when it eats away at precious time to hold other more...
See, this really pissed me off, because basically what he's saying is that Clock is less important than other events and shouldn't be allowed at the championships. And that's not fair. Nobody gets to decide which events are more important, which ones matter more. It's not what cubing's about. No. Every event is just as important. Just because you're not a 3x3 main or a big cube main or 3 blind, that does not mean that, you winning a major championship is not just as important as the person who won 4x4. No, of course not. So judging events by their popularity or just your decision on what's more important, no, not fair at all.
Popular events. Some arguments that were against clock, that were in the poll, stated that clock is the only non-twisty puzzle related event.
Literally does not matter at all.
In the WCA.
It's not called the World Twisty Puzzle Association. It's called the World Cube Association. Are we going to remove Pyraminx or Megaminx? No. I mean, it's still a puzzle. It still has faces. It's still a Rubik's puzzle. I don't see why people always make this comment. It seems like people lean in on a few good points and then add these filler points that don't actually mean anything, just to fill it out, make it seem like it matters, but actually there isn't that much of a case for clock being removed.
Another being that clock is harder to judge. The judging process forces the judge to touch the puzzle.
Okay, but you see how he grabbed it there, using this part of the clock and this part of the clock. You're not going to accidentally make a turn. After affecting the pin state afterwards, it does not change anything. And it's very clear if someone does a move afterwards, because you can see the first face, yeah, and all of the pins are up. So if you accidentally turn a dial, 4 pieces on this are going to change state on this side that you've just looked at and is solved. It's going to be very clear that you've done that. In terms of judging, again, it's a solvable issue, and it has started to get better and better. So, for example, the use of these clock covers. So we used to use paper covers, which would mean the pins would get the pins would get affected while transporting a clock. But now we've got these 3D printed ones that are shaped in a way that the pins cannot move. And that is really valuable and has led to a lot fewer extras. The next thing we can do is, in the introduction to competing and just before the clock round, we need to just remind people to remove the clock cover slowly. It takes seconds to say that, but people won't rip it off and knock the clock over. The only other thing I can think is pin states. Now, usually the pin state matters to the scramble, and if the pins are found to be wrong on your video, even though the scramble is correct, you can be given an extra for it, or DNF'd. And that's obviously a very annoying thing about clock, but I've seen it proposed recently that changes. Not that you can change pins in inspection, but that if it's discovered to be a misscramble in that way, then that doesn't matter. It makes a very minor difference. So that's that. Clock judging can get easier and easier. The other thing is, some events are harder to judge, but the best thing you can do when it comes to events that are harder to judge around the scramble is have 2 groups that aren't based on speed, and then all the fast people who have just competed in their group will scramble the next group, run the next group, help people to judge the next group, and vice versa. And that helps a lot.
And possibly tamper with its state in order to confirm it's solved. That alone could have an effect on the consistency of clock results.
Why are we watching a guy eating the thing?
Both being recorded properly. From my perspective as a broadcaster, all other cubes can be commentated on, and people can visibly see the steps of the solve. For clock,
I hate people talking about this. I guess there's a very big difference in what people want cubing to become, but I don't think cubing needs to change to be more commentatable on. Your average competition is not going to be broadcast. Just full stop. There's so many UK competitions this year. If we were to try and broadcast all of them, we would not have the money to. Registration fees would be through the roof, and it would be ridiculous. You don't need to be able to commentate on it. People need to be able to get good times that they practiced for at home, and they need to be able to do it in competition. It really breaks the idea of how you improve at cubing, because if you're at home, you're doing solves because they're fun to do and you can feel yourself improving. But if it becomes a proper sport with with commentary and like, it just feels like you'd be practicing to beat people, not to just improve your own times. Cubing is very independent. It doesn't need to be. Obviously, like, live broadcasts of the European Championships have been great, but they worked really well, even during clock. So, for example, Liam Wadek hosted his own Monkey League for clock, and I commentated on that, and I did fine. It was completely fine. You can do it. You don't have to be able to see the puzzle. That's not the whole story of commentary. Honestly, if you watch 3x3 commentary, people aren't telling you like the algs people are doing as they do them. If you watch Big Cube commentary, I guess people are saying, okay, now he's on this step, but that's maybe once every like 30 seconds or something. In general, that's not how cubing commentary goes. And I'd really encourage you to watch the live streams of like Euros and Worlds and US Nats, and it's yeah. Because most of it is just filler with discussion, and that's a lot more interesting. My family all watched the Euros live stream as I was there, and they commented on it saying that it was actually really entertaining just to hear the chats they were having in between. They were talking about cubing, they were talking about not cubing. It was actually a very good commentary.
All you get is the flip. You can't see the dials of the clock or where the puzzle state is at all during the solve. How do we expect to grow cubing as a sport if even the people who know the sport can't even effectively describe what's going on?
If you don't need to. If it don't broke, don't fix it. And cubing is really great as it is. It is really, really great as it is, and it does not need to be changed in this way.
Clock in itself has really no correlation to any other event.
Yeah. Clock skills transfer over to any other event.
As a community,
I mean, it doesn't matter that the clock skills aren't transferable either. The square one skills aren't transferable. Cube skills aren't transferable. Neither are pyramid skills. I don't. Clock is, yes, very different to any other puzzle, but it's another thing that's a non-issue that's being used to fill out other small points to make them sound like there's more of a case for it, which there isn't.
do we remove an event in order to make the sport more spectator-friendly and consistent? Do we really want to spend the already limited time at major championships to go to 3 to 4 hours of clock rounds instead of relays and other events that grow the...
Well, how long do you think a clock round takes? Um, 3 to 4 hours of clock rounds. Let me find a UK one, because that's yeah, we have 2 clock rounds at East London, and the first one has been given 50 minutes. Second one has been given 50 minutes. I can tell you for a fact that is more than you need. That's 10 minutes per solve. Wow. If it's 2 groups, it's 5 minutes per solve, and there's not that long between it. This is like a very generous amount of time to give it. But basically, 3 to 4 hours of clock rounds. What? How long do you think clock is going to take? No, it's not going to take that long. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But as I said, oh god, the UK Championships, how it was done. I don't know if they mention it here. Basically, if you look at the schedule, you see there's some overlaps. So here's 4x4 first round, here's 4 blind final, and these overlap. So you see this group is like they've got 3 stages, and this one is shorter than this one. So they can hold events simultaneously, by doing the groups well. And the way this works is it means they can hold more rounds because they're scheduling things together, and group fire can do this. So that's a way of getting around the issue of time at championships without removing rounds. Now, and there were plenty of rounds of stuff: 3 of Scoop, 2 of Pyraminx, Square 1, all of these, 2 of these, 3 of OH, 2 of Blind and Big Cubes, 3, 4 of 3x3. There's so many rounds. Fit very well into the schedule. So, I think it's not important.
The sport more. At what point do we just let go?
So, I mean, that's my thoughts just as I go through the video. I just want to say that there's really not that much against clock that can't be disproven. Now, I have an unlisted video on my channel, which was a big sort of video essay about it, but honestly, I've never really been satisfied with it, and I don't know if I want to try and make it again. But clock is a lot more to it than you think. So people think clock is just you learn a pin order and then you do solves forever, and some people do that, but there's no flip. No flip is a new development, and it's still, the technique for it is still being developed. Caleb has had like a lot of stuff that you can learn, which can make it more efficient, and it's actually really interesting. But even if you're not doing no flip, there's still interesting clock solutions you can do without. And I'm just going to show one as an example because it is an unlisted video. So you see, this is about to go against the pin order completely. So starting with 2 pins up, for example. And these are things you can like learn to spot in inspection. And most people don't know how to do that. That's like a really interesting thing you can start to apply for solves, and there's always more things. You can always get a little bit closer to the optimal clock solutions, and it's really cool. There's really no point for it, and I think it's a really toxic idea to just try and remove events. Removing events is going to just upset people and remove them from some competitions, which, if you're organising a competition and you don't want clock, don't have clock. If you're going to a competition and you don't like clock, don't compete in clock. Don't help out with it. But there's no reason to remove the event. And this is what I said about feet, this is what I'm saying about clock now. There is no benefit to it. You will never go. Nobody has gone to a competition since the start of 2020 and said, Christ, this competition is running so much better now that feet has been removed. No, because there were so many competitions that didn't have feet in the schedule anyway. Anyway, that's my ramble. Hopefully that's somewhat coherent. My voice is a bit croaky because I've got a bit of a blocked throat, but there it is.